Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. It is another week of us chatting about marketing, work, all that kind of stuff. Trying a different filming setting this week, still kind of figuring out this camera a little bit, so let me know if this seems better than last week's video. I felt like the lighting was switching up a lot, so trying to see if this setting that I'm working on using now is a little bit better overall. But this week I posed a question on my TikTok, but I wanted to kind of just expand on my thoughts here. I felt like it would be a good conversation. I definitely want folks to engage in the comments. So if you have thoughts on today's topic, please don't hesitate to engage with me in the comments. Happy to have those conversations there. So basically what I want to talk about as someone who's worked in a 9-to-5 setting and also worked in places with more regular hours, like taking my time in hospitality, for example. And then now I'm on this journey of solopreneurship, working as a marketing freelancer. I have a lot of thoughts on what I prefer, or even if I have a preference between the two. And I want to know if you have a preference between working 9-to-5, having that kind of standard structure for your work week, or if you're more suited for, I guess, more variety in your work in terms of having different hours, kind of being always on. And this is why I sometimes refer to this type of work as a 24/7 job versus a 9-to-5, is hopefully one that you start at 9 or whatever, 8, and then you clock out after your 8 hours, and then you go and do things other than that and focus on other things besides work. And I feel like I've found a pretty good rhythm and a pretty good work-life balance early on in my solopreneur journey, but I also feel like it can be hard, especially when you have so many different ideas. You're such a creative person, and you know there's the chance that you're always thinking about what you could be doing next. Like you could be thinking about your next video idea, for example. You could be thinking about your next blog post. You could also be thinking about how you want to improve pitching yourself to future clients. You know, you could be thinking about different things with your offerings. You could be all the time. I feel like my brain is just 24/7. Like I'm writing down things as much as I can in my notes app. My notes app is a real reflection of what my brain looks like. I feel it's the most accurate depiction, but I even keep a notepad and pen beside my nightstand. So if I have ideas, you know, as I'm winding down for bed or something comes to me, I don't want to forget it, I'll write it down. Pen and paper, can't go wrong with that. But I feel like there's aspects of the 9-to-5 that I really love and have missed, but there's also things that I don't love about it. I can say that I do love with a 9-to-5, I love the structure that often can come with that. And it might not be like structure within the organization itself, but just in terms of having a routine in your day, having, you know, set hours for the most part. Of course, there's almost always exceptions to that. And then also, you know, really finding that you can set a good routine for yourself. If your hours are set, that time is accounted for, and then you can kind of just go about your week that way. You know what tasks you're working on. Maybe you're working in a team and you're just kind of, you know, going through the gradual steps of completing a project. Maybe you have set times for specific meetings like one-on-ones, weekly team meetings, stand-ups, you know, all that sort of stuff. So as you start to get into the groove of it, there's definitely a pattern that can emerge, and you can just use that to your advantage, I feel, to really just thrive in having a good, strong routine. And not to say, obviously I'm, you know, working for myself right now, but not to say that you can't have a routine as well. So I don't think it's exclusive to a 9-to-5 setting, but I definitely think it's easier to set a routine when you have a set work hour. Everything kind of just has to be planned around that. So whether that's social activities, whether that's putting in time for the gym, and you know, it can all be done, but it just has to be approached differently. Meanwhile, as a solopreneur, every day is different. Sometimes, you know, I have projects, I'm working actively with clients. If I'm not working on client stuff, you know, I'm maybe wrapping up a project and thanking them for their time, making sure to keep that door open in case there's other projects that come down the line. You know, maybe I'm following up with clients or prospective clients that I was pitching to. Maybe I'm following up on, you know, quotes that I've sent out. There's so many different things, but there's some days, honestly, where you're not actually actively working on the business. But I don't think that you should not do at least one activity that kind of pertains to that, whether that's taking an hour out of your day to brainstorm some ideas, whether that's updating something on your website, putting new content out there, whether that's filming a video, whether that's editing. Like, all of these little actions go into what I'm trying to frame and build out as my personal brand. So even if you're not delivering something or executing on work for your clients, there's still things that you need to be doing or factoring in on your day-to-day that are going to come into building your personal brand. So I love that gives me such flexibility and such variety in what my days can look like, but it can also be hard to not have such a set schedule sometimes as someone who appreciates structure, right? So it's just essentially a learning curve and something that I have to set for myself. But I think that the flexibility of working for yourself, yes, it's more stressful. You don't know how much money you'll have coming in. Things are, can be chaotic in that way, but I honestly wouldn't trade it for anything, at least not right now. I feel like it works well for where I'm at in life. There's things that I want to do in terms of additional learning I want to take on for myself, and having the flexibility of working for myself while wanting to pursue other things in the next, let's say year to 2 years. It just feels right for where I am in life. I think I've gotten a lot out of being in 9-to-5 settings, a lot of positive things out of a 9-to-5 space, but there's also been a lot of negative experiences coming out of those spaces, and I've often had to find myself a way out of those environments in order for myself to thrive from a mental health perspective, which is unfortunate. And, there's obviously, like I'm saying, there's stressors that come with working for yourself and being in your own environment, but it's just really different, like it's things that you can work for yourself to really mitigate and create the environment that you would want to thrive in. And maybe if you start working with other people, like, you've created an environment that would be safe and for them to thrive in as well. So I really do think that if you have the opportunity, or if you have the desire to work for yourself, it can be such a powerful thing to challenge yourself in pursuing. I also think that you should go into it with some planning, some caution, make sure you have some money set aside just in case you have a slower month and you're not getting paid. Sometimes people don't pay you on time. That's thankfully never been my experience, at least not so far. I did have a lag in payment, but I know people who have, had to take legal action to receive their payments, and, they still haven't received that money, and it's put a lot of strain on them mentally and emotionally. And that's something that hasn't happened to me. So I'm very grateful for that. But having an emergency fund, I think, is the number one thing. If you're like, hey, I don't want to do this 9-to-5 thing anymore, I'm just going to step out on my own and I'm just going to go for it. It might be great in the beginning, but it's all about timing. But even if you have good timing and things are rolling, when you kind of separate yourself from that 9-to-5 life, if that is your story, things can change. People can say they don't want to work with you anymore. People can have budget constraints, and then they don't work with you as long as they hope to. So always be prepared for those layover periods, because if you don't do that, I feel like it can be very disheartening, especially early on in your process of making that switch. If you are someone that's mostly worked for yourself and now you're thinking about going into something more structured like a 9-to-5, there are people out there that I know that have done that. They're trying to go into an office setting when they've kind of come out of college after having done their own thing, and it's totally a shock to the system. I think in the same way that, if you go into that corporate structure right away and then you try to step back and do your own thing, it's definitely going to be a shock to the system, right? So just think about who you have in your network already. Make sure you have those conversations about what work is really like for them. Make sure you talk with people that are going to be really honest about that, because it's different for everyone, and you want to make sure that you are setting yourself up with the most realistic expectations. Every organization is going to be different. Every manager is going to be different. People are going to have different expectations, but the more you set yourself up by doing that research and speaking to people in your life that you think will be honest with you, that's honestly the best thing I think you can do if you're trying to move into a more structured setting, because when you're used to being on your own time, your own schedule, it is an adjustment and it is a shock to the system. Vice versa, if you've always been a corporate person or someone just in a 9 to 5 setting, and then you decide to go towards working for yourself, again, make sure you're prepared financially. Talk to people that you might know that have already done that and made that transition. Ask them those questions. Ask them, what's been hard for them, why they decided to leave. Did they take some time to do both, as in working 9 to 5 and then starting their own thing, or did they just kind of take the leap? Like, everyone's story, again, will be different, but it's important that you take that kind of information in for yourself before making that decision. But yeah, all that to say, I don't really know if I can choose between what I think is better. Like, I think there are pros and cons to both 9 to 5 and 24/7 / working for yourself. And the only way to really know what works for you is to try. And as someone who's done both, I still don't have the answer. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think I'm still learning, I'm still exploring, I'm still figuring out what works for me. And I'm really open to that. And I think that if you're open to that as well, it's an opportunity for you to grow and to become a different or better version of yourself, potentially, that at least challenge themselves, try something new, and worst case, if it doesn't work out, just go back to what you were doing. That is some people's reality, is just, locking into that job, and, they don't ever push themselves out of their comfort zone. And there's nothing wrong with that. If that's what works for them, cool. But if you know that you want to do more and you want to try more, you owe it to yourself to try, to take that opportunity. Worst case scenario, you go back to how things were, or you pivot in a different direction entirely. But either way, challenging yourself in this way, you will learn something. And, you'll have an opinion on yourself that you might not have had before. You'll have opinions that you can share with others when they ask you these kinds of questions, if you've inspired them to do something in their life or make a change. So I think it's worth it every single time. And again, I'd love to know if you have thoughts on this in the comment section. Thank you guys for tuning in for another week, and I'll be back next week with another hot topic.